Hello, I'm Seth Clevenger, Managing Editor of Features and Multimedia at Transport Topics. Thank you for tuning in to the latest program in TT's Executive Webinar Series. During today's webinar, we're going to explore how benchmarking powered by artificial intelligence can enable smarter fleet management decisions. Modern fleets collect massive amounts of valuable data from vehicle telematics, back office systems, maintenance records, and other sources, but without the ability to fully analyze and measure it against comparable fleet operators, it's impossible to utilize effectively. And that's where AI benchmarking comes in. To learn more about this topic, I'm very excited to bring in Tim Haynes, Vice President of Digital and Customer Data at Penske Transportation Solutions, our program sponsor. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Benchmarking isn't new, but what we can do with it now and the clarity it can bring to your decisions is on a different level. That's where the real power is.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful here to just start with the basics and get the foundation built for this conversation. Why is it so valuable for fleet operators to compare how they're performing versus other fleets? How can this information help businesses make better decisions and ultimately improve their operations and become more efficient?
Fleet owners know their own numbers. They know how they're operating. They know how their different parts of the business, different distribution centers, how they stack up against each other. But they don't know how they stack up against other fleets that are operating in the same way. It's not just their competitors. It's other fleets that operate the same geography or the same type of load or the same type of trips. And without the ability to look at those other fleets, you think I'm doing great, but could I do better? And that's really what we're looking at is how do we get the get the fleets or the fleet managers the ability to compare yours to another similar fleet. And using AI, that's where we're creating an apples to apples comparison so that you can actually have confidence in what you're seeing and know that, okay, I could do better or I'm actually outperforming them. It helps to surface blind spots that you're not seeing because you're looking totally internally. And I mean, something as simple as you're running a dry van in the Northeast, but the fleet that you may be compared against, not through ours, but where traditional might be a refrigerated van running in Texas. Two totally different scenarios, two totally different ways of operating. And with the AI and with Catalyst AI at this point, that's what we're doing is creating that apples to apples comparison. So that's how you can improve. You're looking against other fleets that are similar to yours and saying, okay, how are they doing? I'm doing well. Great. Can I do better? And then how? Versus, all right, where do I have to work on?
Yeah, for sure. The details really matter here, right? If you're, running a drive-in operation and you're getting better fuel economy than a flatbed carrier, well, I would hope so. That's not a very useful comparison. Fleet benchmarking is not new, right? I mean, this has been available in some form for many years, but in the past, it's usually relied on aggregated benchmarks, right, using industry averages. So you're getting that drive-in and your flatbed operation and kind of putting them all together in the same pot, and that doesn't tell you that much. So you mentioned the Penske Catalyst AI benchmarking tool that you've introduced. This is providing more specific comparisons with similar fleet operations, right? You mentioned some of the factors, geography, equipment type. But again, just tell us how this provides more relevant information compared with some of the previous benchmarking efforts we've seen in the industry. Why is it so important to dig deeper and provide that more apples to apples comparison that you described?
Well, I think first off, traditional benchmarks, as you said, they're static. They're industry wide averages. So it's this aggregated group that you don't know what's included in it. Even if they break it down to class eights and each individual class, how are you actually compared? What's the makeup of the fleet? What's the is it all sleepers or all day cabs or whatever? And being able to do that comparison and then drilling down into it. So instead of a static or a monthly or even an annual, Catalyst AI delivers continuous insights. So it's always looking at what's the data coming in. We're capturing the data, we're running it up against what your vehicle is, what are similar vehicles, and showing you real fleet data. And it's from all of the fleets and all the customers that we have aggregated, but then aggregated in such a way that it's matched to your fleet. And things like seasonality or geography or load type or operational use. All of those things come into a like comparison, and that actually gets you the ability to drill down into it and give the benchmarks and then see how you're progressing. It's the first platform in the industry to combine this scale of operational data with AI to actually create that benchmark and make it actionable.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that overview. And when we talk about ways to improve operations, I think it's useful here to kind of dig into those metrics. What are the key performance indicators? What are the metrics that companies can really track through benchmarking? Some of the ones we've mentioned, of course, fuel economy. You can also look at equipment utilization, vehicle uptime on the maintenance side. Those are some of the most important ways that you can measure how profitable, how successful your fleet is compared to like operations. But what do you see as the most impactful ways for fleets to improve their operations through benchmarking? Where does this really tend to move the needle?
So when you look at a benchmark, you can see, okay, am I doing better or am I doing worse? And if you're doing better, great. But what do you do about it if you're not doing as well as you could and you have an opportunity to improve? And so it's not just about, are you above the average, are you below the average? And keep in mind, that's the average. That's not necessarily how people are truly operating. It also shows you what's driving that difference. So if your MPG is high and you've got, or pardon me, is low and you've got high idle time, well, okay, what can you do to actually reduce your idle time? That's going to have a direct impact. It highlights operational factors. So it's like, what are you doing? Are you getting your maintenance done on time? What is your idle time? Like I said, what are the habits of the drivers? Not what is the driver doing, but how is the truck actually being operated? And all of those things impact the performance of the vehicle, how it continues to operate, and each of those things actually vary from one fleet to the other. What's different about this is the recommendations that we're doing are tailored to your situation, your fleet,
Mhm.
and how it can, here's where you can look. We're not guaranteeing how you're going to improve, but here's where you can look. And if you make these types of improvements, here's what we think your improvement will be. And it's giving you those those actionable things that you can do. So it's like, okay, I can go reduce driver time. Let's have a campaign, talk to the, not driver time, idle time. Let's have a campaign and talk to the drivers about, all right, when you're delivering, shut the engine off so you don't have that idle. I mean, simple things like that can actually have a very large impact.
Yeah. And of course, as I mentioned at the start, fleet operators are collecting massive amounts of data today. You think about all the technology that's been introduced over the years to the vehicle, in the cab, all the back office systems. There's a lot of data flowing through a modern transportation operation. And all that information is potentially useful for benchmarking purposes. But the challenge, I think you've already highlighted, is extracting real actionable insights from all that information, especially when you're trying to analyze it at scale. Um, and that's really where we get into the value of artificial intelligence. AI is helping us to understand what are the trends, what can we understand, how can we utilize this data, that maybe a human being crunching the numbers we could spend eons working on. But of course, there's not a lot of fleet operations that have the wherewithal to have their own data scientists on staff. So AI really does open some stuff up here. Uh, how is AI allowing us to, again, harness this data? What does it allow us to do with this data that otherwise wouldn't be possible?
So I'll say, think of it in terms of, we all get email. We all complain about spam and how many messages we get a day. Now you get hundreds or maybe even 1,000 messages a day if you're unlucky enough to get on a distribution list. How do you process that? How do you go through that? And how do you weed through the noise? AI is actually the tool that allows us to go in and do things at scale. We're processing hundreds of millions of data points daily from multiple different systems. And to be able to get that into, I'll say, number one, let's weed out the noise. Let's make sure that we're actually getting data in that's good and that is relevant to how I'm operating. Let's make sure that we can do this quickly and at scale, because humans, as you said, there's no way we're going to weed through that. I come in, if I have 100 emails in the morning, I'm like, oh man, this is going to take, Even if it takes you 5 minutes to hit delete or grab them or whatever, you got to at least have an idea of what's there. AI is actually doing that right now.
Mhm.
It also enables continuous updates instead of a once and done. So even if you could get through all of the messages, by the time you get through it, you've got more information. So this is a continuous feed of information, and AI is what's actually enabling that to happen at scale.
Yeah. And yes, there's a lot of data in the transportation industry, but all too often that data tends to be messy, right? There's so many different
Yeah.
systems, siloed information. You mentioned email inboxes. I think that's probably Exhibit A of where some of the information resides, and rather than where it really could be more useful. So just tell us more about how you gather and analyze the data that feeds into Catalyst AI, how you help to bring some order to the chaos of the data environment in the transportation industry.
So if you, we'll go back to the email example. If you think of it, instead of one email, now one email system, think of I've got 20 of them or 30 of them or 40 of them. So it's a matter of, okay, going through one, let's get through that. But we have to get data from multiple sources. They each have slightly different formats: telematics providers, OEMs, customer systems, Penske-owned systems, third-party data that people want to include. And the first step is actually normalizing it. Let's get it into a consistent format and a consistent time frame, and make sure that the pieces match up, so you can start assembling that story and telling the story to the customer. And the ability to process and organize that data is where AI is. And it's not just AI that you point at it and forget either. It's a
Mhm.
team of data analysts and data scientists sitting there and making sure that the models aren't drifting, making sure that they are staying relevant, making sure that they're giving the valid information. And that ensures the benchmarking is clean and accurate. So it's literally a constant process of gathering the information, ensuring that the quality is there, ensuring that you're not getting garbage in and garbage out. It's like, if when you look at the devices that are out there and how they're sending information, you could actually get your location of your truck, because the GPS had a little bit of a hiccup. It could say it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Well, you don't want to consider that one. That one's not realistic, and that's where having the AI, having people looking at it and saying, does this make sense, ensures that the benchmarking is based on clean, accurate, and trustworthy data. Because ultimately, we want you to make a decision with confidence and know that it's going to help your fleet.
Yeah, and obviously, organization of the size and scope of Penske, you have your team of data scientists. The average trucking operation does not. It's nice so they can lean on this, so they don't have to. A topic I wanted to move into here is just current market conditions. As we all know, trucking is always a low margin business. It's a tough industry, but the past few years have been really tough for carriers. Right, there's too much capacity in the market, and persistently soft freight rates, and has made it a really tough go for a few years now. From your vantage point, Tim, do you see this putting even more pressure on fleet managers to wring even more efficiency out of their operations, and
It
even more tightly
definitely,
control costs?
yeah, it definitely is. When you think of it, a small increase in your MPG can have direct impact to the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's like, and especially for the large fleets where they're running lots of mileage. That's a tenth of a mile per gallon makes a huge difference. So yeah, in tough conditions, the efficiency of how you run your operations matters even more. And Catalyst pinpoints, so it's not just telling you whether you're doing better or worse, it or worse. It tells you what areas you can improve on. It pinpoints specific high impact opportunities to close those gaps. So if your MPG is a little bit lower and you're running over the road, do you have an aero package on your vehicle? So do you have to cut down on the resistance? If you're running a whole lot of local deliveries, is your idle time high? And if so, why? What are those simple things that you can do? And it helps make those targeted changes to allow you to protect your margins or to increase them. Ideally, you want to increase them. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's good opportunity here as well to go a bit deeper into how fleets translate benchmarking information into better practices and decisions, right? So you have the information at your fingertips, but it's not just information, right? This is not just key performance indicators. This is there's a dashboard that prioritizes the most impactful or maybe the most urgent issues that could affect your fleet's MPG, could affect maintenance, utilization scores. Just give us some examples of how this is actually guiding fleets toward real world improvements, right? Not just presenting a ton of information and KPIs that in a lot of cases fleets are already getting.
Well, and again, back to benchmarking versus, it's like, it's not just a report. It's giving you examples of, okay, reduce your idle time to do this. You can fix missed maintenance. So, you're leasing a vehicle, you're running your own, you've got a maintenance cycle coming up, but your business is saying, I just got to keep this truck running. And so you delay it. Well, delaying it actually means, vehicles, they're mechanical. Things unfortunately do break. And having those regular maintenance schedules, targeting how the vehicle is actually being operated to help it operate more efficiently. And then it prioritizes those metrics by the biggest positive or negative impact. So when we see things like idle time's the easiest one. So you've got high idle time. So let's reduce your idle time. And as the idle time comes down, the next thing may be, okay, you do need narrow package because you're over the road. And they may seem disconnected, but just as as an example, it's drilling down into and giving you the right priorities based on a continuous feedback loop and what changes you're making to your operation. And at the same time, as other customers are making their changes, so that the benchmark is constantly moving. And so you can see how you're performing, you can see what's happening, and it gives you that advantage of saying, okay, I can do this and it's going to help.
Yeah. And, it's not a static benchmark to your point, right? You can, hopefully the whole industry is going to keep getting better, and the bar will continue to be raised, and that's important again in an industry where everybody's hunting for fractions of pennies. A fraction of a penny at scale really adds up, and sort of the key to management and fleet operations and the trucking industry is finding those fractions of a penny. Your point earlier, benchmarking isn't just a reporting tool, right? It shows you where you're doing well, where you have opportunities to improve. It can also lead you down some different and sometimes unexpected paths, right? Depending on what you find,
Correct.
right? As you overturn different rocks, you can be surprised perhaps at what you find. Can you share some examples of the kinds of insights that you've seen fleets uncover through this benchmarking process?
Well, I've used the example of idle time, and that isn't always the main driver. It can be horsepower, it can be your transmission, your vehicle use. I remember one thing in particular. We had a customer who we're showing them their fleet and we're showing them their different hub locations or their distribution centers and showing them how they're operating. And they sat back and they're sitting there going, your data's wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, your MPG is too high. It's like, we don't have that high an MPG at that location. And we actually pushed back on them and said, no, it's actually right. You're running mostly light and medium duty trucks out of that location. You're not running tractors out of there. And they sat back and they go, you're right. It's one of these things that they are so close to the operations and they're looking at how they're, location A versus location B and how do I optimize it? You have to take a step back and look at the context when you're looking at the data and understand how that helps you improve your performance. So, that they said it was too high. Could they have been using that as the benchmark of the other ones to try and get to? That's not realistic when you're running tractors out of one location and medium duty trucks out of another. So
Right.
Understanding that context when they're looking at the data and being able to see that and interpret that is really one of the, I'll say it's a huge eye opener that we saw and actually talked through with the customer.
No, that's a great example, and maybe yet another example of how either messy data or data without the proper context can perhaps lead you astray. So that context and clean data is really key to understanding how you're truly operating in the real world. An important point about benchmarking, I think, is that there's always room to improve. So even if you're one of those companies that's well known as an industry leader, you're generally outperforming all your peers. There's always something you can be doing better, and chances are someone out there is probably doing better in some facet of your operation. But do you see benchmarking as something that any fleet can benefit from? Right, it's not only for those that are catching up. This is something that anyone can extract value from, right?
Correct. So it's like we talk about benchmarking, and you're either above or below the benchmark. Um, so there's two things we can look at it from. Everyone thinks of large fleets getting benefit out of this. This works for all sizes of fleets because when we're doing the comparison, we're comparing you against same size fleet
Mm-hmm.
running the same type of operations. And sometimes those smaller fleets can actually see even bigger benefits to, in terms of their overall operation. Um, the other piece to this, though, is even if you're running above the average or above the benchmark, there are still things that you're doing that could be improved. And those are the actionable insights that we're showing. So even if you're above the benchmark, we can still show you what are the either biggest impacts in terms of positive or negative. Mm-hmm. So if you see the positive, okay, can I do more of that? If I see the negative, how do I remove that negative piece that can actually get me even that much more performance? So it's not just about are you below the benchmark, it's actually how can I improve? So I mean that's I think a key point with this. Yes, it's a benchmarking tool, but even more importantly, it's telling you what can you do to get better.
One interesting feature that's available in the Catalyst AI tool is this ability to benchmark against a fantasy fleet comparison. This is kind of a cool concept. So again, nobody's perfect, but what would perfect look like? The idea here is to show how a fully optimized fleet operation would perform in the real world. Again, previous conversation, you compared this to finding the best players for a fantasy football team. Yep. Similar here, the idea is to find the best trucks in the real world to show what the best possible performance, again, for this fully optimized fleet could look like. Just tell us a little bit more about this fantasy fleet concept and how fleet managers can really use that to find ways to improve, even when they're doing really well.
When you think about it, I'm trying to think how to phrase this, but with the fantasy team or the fantasy football, well, let's take a step back maybe. Think of it in terms of you go to buy a car and it tells you, EPA expected mileage is 25 miles to the gallon. Then you go and read the testing sites. It says real world mileage, we're getting 20 miles to the gallon. So instead of going against an artificial standard or a controlled use of the vehicle, Fantasy Fleet shows you the best vehicles out there that are similar to yours in terms of specs, configuration, and usage. And it tells you this is what you can shoot for. This is your North Star. This is where you can, realistically, this is what you can get. And even if you are a top performing fleet, you still have a mix of vehicles in there. Some are going to perform better than others. Fantasy Fleet shows you if you were able to optimize your whole fleet, this is what you could get. And it shows you again what specific levers you can use to close the gap. And it does it in such a way so that again it's the constant update. It's the matches for the fantasy fleet and the vehicles are on multiple dimensions, configuration, operation, environment, and it's really giving you the confidence that okay, this is what's the best that I could do based on how I run my fleet, and then what can I do to get better?
Yeah, I think that that guidance on what to do is such an important part of this too, right? It's not just telling you how you're doing; it's how do you get to this improved operation, this improved efficiency that you're really shooting for here. Before we near the end here, I'd love to kind of zoom out here and just take a big picture look at how the transportation industry has evolved in the past years and decades, really. There was a time when transportation was pretty widely regarded as a technology laggard, right? Trucking was a little bit behind the times, but I've seen in my, personally 14 years covering the industry that it's really come a long way in terms of technology adoption and implementation. And of course, you've seen a lot of this during the course of your career, Tim.
Yes.
A lot
Yep.
more than me. But what's your big picture view if you think about how technology and data have unlocked better fleet management practices over the decades? How much has transportation technology advanced in that time, and where do you see it going from here?
The where I see it going from here is going to be a little tough because you know things are constantly evolving, and the speed that we're evolving at is I'll say exciting and frightening at the same time. Uh, when you look back though at the industry, we've had the ability, and well, trucks have had technology on them for a long time. They've been collecting information for a long time. What's changed is the number of devices on those vehicles. There's more sensors, more IoT sensors, more connectivity, the ability to get the information instead of having to wait until a truck comes into the bay and plugging into it. Um, so the ability to get real-time data, the volumes of data that we're getting has also changed. With those sensors comes more information. And the ability to process that, computing power, the cloud computing, AI, and the advances in even the algorithms and development, the continuous insights that we're getting out of that. All of those things they're rapidly evolving, but they can't stand on their own. And what I mean by that is it's not just about data. It's not just about processing and buzzwords AI and machine learning. It still has to be paired with operational expertise to interpret it. We talked about context before. So it's not just about, hey, plug this in and it's going to tell you what to do. Well, you plug it in and it may tell you to do the wrong thing based on how you're operating or what you need to do. And so it's the ability to process the information that's changed. It's the knowledge of the people in the industry that's evolved. And I do mean across the industry, because it's fleet managers have gone from worrying about dispatching and where the truck is to worrying about every penny of every operational aspect of that vehicle, including their drivers.
Yeah.
We're focused on the vehicle, and Catalyst AI is a big part of that shift, making that optimization accessible to those fleet managers in a way that has never been available to them before. And it's like evolution. Well, I think there's going to be more devices. I think we're going to get more power for computing. The question is, what are the challenges that are evolving within the business? And then how do we apply that information there?
Yeah, I think fair to say that trucking is going to become more and more intelligent, more and more data driven, and you're it's kind of speaking to the audience. Your operation has to do the same to compete. How are you?
Very
How do
much.
we, truly be the best we can be through the use of information that we're already gathering in most cases. Before we wrap up here, Tim, I'd love to just turn it over now for any parting thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers. Anything we didn't get to, any final, you get the final word.
Yeah, that doesn't always happen in my family, but okay. I think the biggest thing is you can't fix or change what you don't know or can't see. And Catalyst is allowing fleet managers to see something that they haven't seen before. It's the first benchmarking tool in the industry that's able to deliver not just real-time benchmarks and apples to apples fleet comparisons, but it's also giving you the ability to see what levers to pull. It reveals opportunities we didn't know that existed, and it gives a continuous update. It's used to help fleets improve performance. It's not about are you doing poorly. It's about how can you do better, and it's removing those blind spots. It's saying, okay, we're giving you the information. You can choose to act on it, and gives you a path to act on it. But for business reasons, you may not be able to. Now you can at least understand that, okay, I can't do this, or maybe we can change something else that will impact it. So it's giving you a different view, and there's more insights that you can gather from it. And For those of you who haven't seen it, if you go to PenskeCatalyst.ai, you'll get a little bit more information. You can actually do a quick look at a benchmark tool that you can plug in some information, and it'll give you an idea of just how well your fleet's performing now.
Yeah, that's a great way to start. And this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you coming on, Tim, and sharing your time with us and your insights. It's been a great talk about some pretty exciting pathways forward for the industry. So thank you again.
Thank you.